Hi there. My name is Kenneth Hardcastle.
I'm Anna Karras.
And we're here with the Collier County Public Library Virtual Book Club. Today we're going to be discussing The Queen's Gambit by Walter Tevis. It is the inspiration for the recent Netflix hit. So if you're interested, you might take a peek under the book that inspired it, written in 1983. So young orphan Beth Harmon sees the Methuen home janitor playing chess in the basement, and she is instantly entranced. She demonstrates her skill and voracious appetite for the game, and similarly develops her penchant for addiction when she begins to pocket the tranquilizers that are possibly unethically handed out by the staff.
Possibly.
After leaving the home, she steals her way into a tournament and starts a meteoric rise to chess success. And she'll stop at nothing to take on the best players in the world. So, what were your initial impressions?
Well, I chose this book because initially I saw, this is the one that's the TV show is based on. That's, like you said, topical. So right. It's current, and even though the book is not current, it was written in 1983. I found my initial impressions were I liked the story, except for the really deep dive into the chess games. Though, see, I know how all the pieces move on the board, but I have no clue as to, I don't have any background in chess at all. So it was, those parts I had to kind of gloss over, but the rest of the story I enjoyed very much.
The book was very heavy with chess notation.
Yes.
It's clear that he loved the game and wrote it for others like him who did, not for people who are fans of a TV show 40 years later. I'm familiar with chess notation a little bit. I could visualize some of the moves, and so I was able to appreciate them in that way. But like I'm no pro or anything, so you know most of that probably went over my head. Similarly, the portrayal of addiction that rang true and was a good fit for the character.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought the good fit for the character is presented. She has a very single-minded focus about what she wants, and mostly what that is chess and drugs.
Chess and drugs, yes. Booze too. She drinks a lot. She drinks a lot later.
Yeah.
But yeah, for those of you who haven't read it, we aren't going to tell the whole story in this particular thing. But next week there will be no spoiler alert. We will hold nothing back. However, when she is 9 years old, she's orphaned. Her mother dies in a car accident.
That's the very first page.
First page. So
no spoilers there.
She goes to an orphanage because her father is MIA, and they give her every day. They give her a brown pill, which is a vitamin, and a green pill, which is a tranquilizer, which was apparently common practice in the 50s in orphanages. I'm not sure, but they got in trouble for it while she was in the orphanage, and they stopped giving the tranquilizers to the children. So that was.
But she found ways to still get them.
Yes, she did.
She's very ingenious about it.
Many of them. So.
And has no compunction about lying or stealing to get what she needs.
That's absolutely true. That's a major flaw in her character. A flaw in her character. I mean, she is who she is. I mean, it's one of those things that makes her rather tragic in a way.
Right.
Yeah. Should we take a look at some of the questions that we put up?
Take a look at the questions. First question is, how might our brief glimpse into Beth's early childhood influence her later success?
This is interesting because when I watched the first episode of the TV show last night, and they put in more of a background story for her mother than they do in the book.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think the book has very much background on the mother at all.
There isn't any at all. But in the TV show, they make her a sort of a doctor of mathematics and mentally ill, and which makes some sense.
It does. Based on her character, at least the character in the book.
I mean, it makes. We know that her mother is at least highly intelligent, which makes Beth highly intelligent. Not necessarily, but it does. Just the We don't really get that much of a glimpse into her early life in the book.
So I took early childhood to mean her, her experiences in the orphanage when we first really get to know
Okay.
her. So obviously she meets Mr. Scheibel, who is her first chess educator and sponsor. And then she also forms a friendship with Jolene, which proves important much, much later in the book. And then also she begins to form opinions and coping mechanisms that both help and hinder her
Right.
throughout the rest of the book.
Right.
So that really just lets us get to know who she is and how she's going to be dealing with things as the book unfolds.
Right. I mean, her character is revealed very early in the story, even at a young age.
Right. Next question is, what does Beth lose when she is adopted, and what does she gain?
Well, she loses Mr. Scheibel, unfortunately, who was her, like you said, her first chess teacher and sort of a mentor in a way. Even though he was the janitor of the orphanage, he taught her more there than probably any of the other teachers did. What did she gain? She gained security. She had a home to go to. She wasn't sleeping in a dormitory. She had her own bedroom. All of these things will bring some sort of security to a human being, I would think. Yeah. What do you think?
So Scheibel, she had kind of already lost him at that
Yeah.
point due to punishment and shenanigans in the orphanage.
Shenanigans, yes.
She didn't have
General
access.
shenanigans.
She didn't have access to him like she did before. So she mostly loses her relationship with Jolene.
Yes.
And her copy of Modern Chess Openings.
Yes.
Is a book that, it's the first chess book she had access to, and thus she placed a lot of importance on it as an emotional anchor.
She couldn't find it when she was packing to leave and had to leave without it. We find out many years later what happened to it.
Right.
Right.
But she gains, mostly, to me, an environment where she has a large amount of freedom to entertain herself and get back into chess in a big way.
Yes. Yes, she can devote herself to studying chess because she's already a phenomenal student, so she
Yeah.
blows through her schoolwork and then spends the nights working out chess games on her chessboard.
After she, steals money to buy one.
Right.
Question 3. What genetic and environmental factors shaped Beth's substance abuse issue? Do you think she would have developed these issues had she not lost her first mother, or had she not been adopted by Mrs. Wheatley?
Look, I think the fact that the orphanage was doling out tranquilizers got a lot of little kids addicted.
Yeah, it's kind of a rather large environmental factor.
Yes, yes. And then they cut them off cold turkey, which is also not a nice thing to do. So, I can't blame her for becoming addicted at such a young age. I mean, 9 years old and you're getting a daily tranquilizer, which she would sometimes pocket and keep and take 4 or 5 at a time, which is...
So I don't know if it was exactly genetic per se, but
we don't really know. I mean, what her
right.
her
We don't know
family-
anything about her
no,
family in the
no,
book.
we don't.
Maybe we do in the show. But she definitely had some sort of predisposition to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Because how quickly she took to alcohol later
Yes.
on. Definitely. So.
And I mean, the fact that she's so, like you said, single-minded on chess. I mean, that's an addictive personality right there, being so tunnel vision on one thing, where she could also apply those obsessive skills to drugs and alcohol.
Right.
Very easily.
The question also mentions Mrs. Wheatley.
Mrs. Wheatley, yes.
So she has her own substance abuse issues that she's dealing with, with alcohol and the same tranquilizers that Beth was already familiar with. And she also has a distinct lack of parental oversight.
Yes.
That she shows to Beth. So
she was more, I think, adopted to be more of a companion to Mrs. Wheatley than a daughter.
Right.
And I think they mentioned that in the book that a lot of times back then, children were adopted to be more as companions, or maybe somebody who would help out with chores in the home and stuff like that, as opposed to being an accepted and loved member of the family.
So yeah, so dealing with that as a child, not feeling like an accepted and loved member of the family, in addition to seeing these substance abuse issues play out in other ways, definitely contributed to her own.
Yes. I absolutely agree.
Question 4. How would you characterize Beth and her relationships, and who is the biggest influence in her life?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Well, I would characterize her relationships as being, she always holds people at arm's length. She doesn't let anybody get too close to her. And I think that the person that she really connected as much as one could connect in her position was Benny, who was a young man later on who really sat down with her and made her go through different chess games and examine each play and why the different manifestations of what you could do with each play. And she had never really thought about it before. And they had a friendship, which became more than a friendship, but not really in a way, It was like she was always still holding him at arm's length, but I think she learned the most from him.
My impression of her relationships tended to be that they were quick and discarded when she was done with them, when she got what she needed from them, which sounds mercenary and is mercenary, but it's different when you're examining or when you're experiencing the character through her own eyes.
Right.
It's
and you do
not as bad as it sounds.
You do have empathy for her because so much happened to her when she was young that was beyond her control.
Right.
And you do find yourself rooting for her, that you want her to succeed in life.
So her biggest influences, so the 4 characters that were the biggest influences on her were Mr. Scheibel, who started her on the road and was discarded very quickly. Jolene, yes. Who she kind of idolized in her own mind, and then came back to later on a more equal footing. Mrs. Wheatley,
yes.
Her main mother figure in the novel, with all of its good and bad sides to that. And then Benny, as you mentioned, yes. who was probably her biggest chess influence.
Yes.
Or most educational chess influence, maybe. And maybe Scheibel was bigger in terms of just getting her started.
That could be. It's hard to say. I don't know. Just going back to Mrs. Wheatley, I do think that there was affection that Mrs. Wheatley felt for Beth. I definitely think that I don't know how much Beth felt for Mrs. Wheatley, other than what she could get out of her, but
she definitely.
I think they cared for each other.
Yeah. Beth definitely cared for Mrs. Wheatley. Eventually started to call her mother, and
yes, right.
It wasn't just parasitic.
No.
Although Mrs. Wheatley, they certainly had a parasitic relationship to each other.
Absolutely.
You might call it symbiotic.
Codependent.
Maybe. Codependent. Yeah, that's a good word for it. Once Mrs. Wheatley realized that she could get money out of Beth
winning chess tournaments.
Competitions.
Yeah. And Beth could get pills and booze out of her mother when she wasn't looking.
So yeah, that's her relationships for you. Question 5 is, what do you think about Beth's role as a woman in the man's world of champion chess? Is she ever accepted?
Well, you were asking me earlier when this book was set, and we think it was started. This starts in the 50s sometime.
50s to 70s, somewhere in that time frame. It's about 10 years.
So I think it starts in the late 50s, and it moves like maybe early 60s, and then moves, like you said, through a decade. But so there were no women in chess, and I don't think that she was accepted, even though she did as well as she did, just because it was a man's world. is a man's world.
So you see on that topic, you see again and again throughout the book that a man is disappointed that he lost a game to this girl.
This girl, especially such a young girl, especially in the beginning.
And she struggles constantly with the idea that she's a novelty, lashes out at the journalists who want to talk about her femininity rather than her chess skill. However, in true sportsbook fashion, at least to the limited degree that we see by the end, it's easy and even predictable to say that she is accepted.
We think that's what the author wants us to come away with. Yes,
it's a sports book,
right?
So yay, win,
go team.
So those are our takes on the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Any final thoughts?
I can't think of anything that I want to say right now. I should have prepared something, I suppose. I know you have something prepared.
Oh, sure.
Go for it.
It caused a little bit of a whiplash for me early in the book. So as it goes between like precise chess maneuvers, growing addiction, and then the casual abuse inflicted on a small defenseless girl in an orphanage, some of which was even sexual. So watch out for that. You'll see it in the first chapter. And it kind of continues as she grows up, but you never quite get rid of the grim expectation that something awful's about to happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can see that.
And awful things do happen, just not at the same volatility that they occur in the early chapters.
And you have to also question how much of it is she bringing upon herself.
Right.
When she's older.
Right.
Not when she's a kid.
Yeah.
Everything that happens to her when she's a kid is not her fault. But, I could reason that her addictions to drugs and alcohol really weren't her fault either, but just because they started when she was so young. Her relationships that you say, like you said, she would use the person, then cast them aside as soon as she got what she wanted. That was something that she brought upon herself.
So the book is dated and problematic for some of the reasons we mentioned. But for a sports book written by a man in the 80s, it seemed to me to present a surprisingly nuanced feminist portrayal.
Yeah, it was oddly compelling that that Walter Tevis could write about a young woman so well.
Yeah. It was interesting and compelling for that reason.
I bought into it.
And I'm not surprised that she became eventually a beloved television character too.
Beloved television character, yes. Well, we should see how beloved she is. I'm going to watch another episode tonight.
Yeah, we'll see. So, if you're interested in joining us for the Zoom call, contact me, kenneth.hardcastle at colliercountyfl.gov. Join us next week, Tuesday at 2 o'clock. And thanks for joining us for this.
Yep, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.